people can start losing weight just by making better decisions.
Motivation is driven from the inside out.
Use flexibility as a tool. Rely on structure when it's helpful.
This is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hey guys, I'm Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, here with Corey Probst, and we're going to be into a fitness entrepreneurship section of our Life Mastery podcast series. And Corey, one of the things that came to mind in preparing for this discussion, there's a lot of current event things happening, but they have kind of, in my mind, congealed around inclusivity. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to throw out a few things, just kind of throw some things up in the air and see how you want to juggle them. Sure. The first, we have the Supreme Court ruling that indeed a baker in Colorado can choose not to bake a cake for a homosexual couple. So that's one thing. We have, this was kind of a local news story, but on the heels of that, a hardware store owner decided to put up a sign that said, "No gays allowed." And he felt justified by that Supreme Court ruling that now he can openly discriminate like that. So again, we're talking about inclusivity and exclusivity in terms of fitness entrepreneurship. So there's a couple balls up in the air. Yeah. The next thing is I often quote a study that I heard, must have been a year ago or so, that in terms of acquiring customers or clients, drawing people to you, kind of closing a sale, the number one metric was how many times you make somebody laugh. So there's another ball up in the air. You're making people feel included and happy. Obviously, there has to be some rapport there if you're laughing. Last one. Well, maybe two more. And then we'll start our juggling act. There was a recent Australian study. This kind of goes back to the SCOTUS ruling, which is showing that in an intelligence ranking, so they looked at the IQ of almost 12,000 people, and they were trying to rank based on gross intelligence level some of these behavioral trends that we're seeing, and they showed in a direct correlational line that people of lower intelligence were way more likely to discriminate based on gender, sexual identity, those kind of things. Higher IQ people were not.
Yeah, I read this too.
Okay, so the last thing, I don't know if the memory foam people lost their patent, it expired or something, because I've just been seeing so many new memory foam mattress commercials out there. Like, there's a new company starting every day, and they are some of the funniest commercials that I've ever seen. So if you go to YouTube, and I might post some of these links, you can see like the purple mattress, and there's another one, and they have nothing to do with sleep. They're all about, you'll have better sex, you're going to be smarter, you're going to look better in the office. Have nothing to do. And so again, they're trying to make you laugh, trying to bring humor into this. So all of these things, Corey, had made me think, as a fitness entrepreneur, are we showing inclusivity by being approachable, accessible, by not being critical and even discriminatory by certain measures? So I'm going to throw all those at you and see what kind of sense you can make of it.
Well, so the first thing I think of with humor especially is it's non-threatening. If you're in a position where you're laughing with someone, you're open. That's a vulnerable place to be. And that increases your level of trust for the person that you're with. So that's a big deal. The other thing I'm thinking too, Joe, is, and this word just kept coming to mind, and this won't be a surprise to our listeners because we talk about it all the time, but it's emotion, and not threatening emotion, but comfortable and trustworthy and memorable, and emotion is memorable. So like with these memory foam commercials that you're referencing, whether it has something to do with the company itself or the product, it doesn't necessarily matter. The customer, potential customer, is going to remember the company. And
yeah, I mean, instead of skipping ad, like as soon as you can skip the ad, you automatically hit that button. Like, I'm watching these commercials a dozen times in a row because they're just so funny.
Yes. Yes. So all that makes a lot of sense to me. And in terms of the perception of a brand itself, and if we're going to be involved in a brand, then we want to be able to trust the people behind it and the company itself, and have a sense that they represent our values, really.
Yeah, I think for fitness entrepreneurs, and I think of our own Diet Doc program owners, the first thing we want to do, we have a limited amount of time, perhaps, like you're creating an ad or a physical ad or something. There's a limited amount of space and time to capture somebody's attention. It's an immediate default to want to make that all about credibility. I have to prove to you that I'm the best at what I do, I'm smart, I'm competent, all of these things, instead of reaching out to just something that might be more engaging and want them to stick around and hear more.
I agree with you. I think our tendency is to get all of our credentials on the ad and have it be specifically about maybe the potential client's goal. And to your point, with all of these studies, it really, I think, does come down more to that engagement and that comfortable emotion that we can evoke as a result of them being a part of the ad.
So one of the things I don't want to do, I don't want to leave people with the feeling that, based on that Australian study, hey, if my IQ is low, I'm going to be destined to be homophobic and exclusionary. I mean, those are things that you should probably just recognize. If I have feelings like that, like if I find myself cheering for the guy with the sign, "No gays allowed," maybe I should reevaluate what I'm thinking about in terms of everybody involved, not just a hardware owner ability to handle and manage the business the way he wants. But what about those customers? Are they feeling, even if you don't have a dog in that race, I mean, what is that saying to the customers in there? I mean, that's certainly polarizing.
It does come down to awareness. I will say, hey, that hardware store owner has a right to do that. We all have a right to express our opinions, whether I think they're awful or not. It would surprise me if he had zero level of awareness of how doing that is going to affect business. But maybe he's just that staunchly rooted in his beliefs that he doesn't care. Maybe he doesn't want those people as customers, which that's horrible. I think it's horrible. But to not have thought through any of that would really surprise me.
Well, and again, I want to touch this topic lightly and carefully in that I don't want this to be another point of polarization where we're saying, yeah, those people are not self-aware, they deserve that low IQ ranking and all that. I think we need to come back and just say, okay, so I do have the right to have that opinion. I do have the right to run and market and brand my business the way I want. But is that really the place to do it? And am I adding more discord to the conversation and hurting my bottom line? Again, this is a fitness entrepreneurship segment. I love social psychology. I'm an anthropology, social science writer, student in those fields. And so I love mixing it up on social media, but I don't throw a partisan bomb out there. I always make sure it's parsing apart a very important social point. Although you do end up with people on both sides starting out threatened, and then my goal, of course, is to bring them together and see the other side.
I've seen comments on some of your posts because people do feel threatened and they get upset, and I've watched how you respond to it. And I think that's a very important point too, is if we're aware and we recognize the value of how our brand is perceived, we are going to respond to those people. We're not just going to ignore it, but we need to go in having a plan. How are we going to respond? What's our approach going to be? And is it one of inclusivity, like you said, or exclusivity, where we want to like become divisive, or do we want to bring people together into more of a collective space? Right. I read a stat, Joe, that said like 45% of brand perception is based on what a company says and how they say it. Mm-hmm. Well, what's the other 55%? How a potential customer feels, the emotion that's evoked, reviews that they're reading, what are other customers saying about your business, and a ton of that is on social media. Mm-hmm. That's where people are going to find out about brands these days, and is it a brand that they want to associate with?
Yeah, and staying with our topic of inclusivity, mm-hmm. One of the reasons I wanted to bring that up was you see this all the time. I saw from Robert De Niro saying something angrily about the president. Mm-hmm. A fan of De Niro had a framed picture of him in his house. He took it out to the garbage and did a live stream video, like breaking the photo, ripping it up, breaking the frame and all that, and saying, now that's what Robert De Niro is to me now. Used to be a hero. Now, because he came out with a stance against one political party or person, mm-hmm. he's done. He's out of my life. And so here's my point. Mm-hmm. I think anybody in the public eye, a lot of people say, just shut up and do what you're supposed to do. If you're an actor, just act. I don't want to hear how much you love animals or want big game hunting, or you like this party versus this party. Just do your job.
That's one way of doing it. Yep.
Yet all of us who have any amount of public interaction, mm-hmm. we're complete people. We have other facets and dimensions to us that we want to share and be known and interact with people through. So as a fitness entrepreneur, Corey, you are the vice president of an international company. Mm-hmm. How do you draw that line between how much inclusivity do you want to just be right down the middle paving versus, I've got the right to some opinions and I want to talk about other things?
I don't know that I've ever necessarily looked at it that way, Joe, in terms of deciding what I'm going to say or how I'm going to say it. It's, as a psychologist too, it's just kind of ingrained in me to approach everything from a very collective perspective. We're all humans. That's how I look at it. And it's never my intention to go into anything. And I'm always thinking through this as I'm just typing a response on social media. It's, how is this person going to be affected? How are the other people who are going to be reading this response going to be affected? What are they going to take from it? Is it going to move them a certain way, positive or negatively? I'm not sure I answered your question, but
you did in a perfect way, and here's why. As soon as I finished that question, I thought immediately, Corey doesn't even think that way. As a psychologist, as a counselor, and I think this is just who you are and why you are a therapist, you do. You think of everybody involved. And that was my very first point in this topic, was thinking about, like, that guy hanging up that sign, thinking about everybody involved. Yes. And the interesting thing, this my social science category bookshelf in my library here is over there. And I almost want to grab a book and show that the very first chapter in any social psychology textbook is all about the collective versus the individual. We have our individual goals, pursuits, and rights, and yet we have the collective society that impacts. Mm-hmm. And that is almost the bottom line of any discord in any society. Mm-hmm. Is somebody is over here defending their right to something, mm-hmm. and then somebody over here is saying, well, that hurts the entire group or helps the entire group. I mean, look at what's happening on the border with separating families. We've got 2,000 kids being put in cages, separated from their parents. One father committed suicide, not knowing if he was ever going to see his kids again. And that's, well, they're criminals, let's get rid of them, they shouldn't be here anyway, versus, oh my gosh, we can at least do it a different way. Let's think of the whole family, the whole society. But again, that it always comes down to the individual versus the collective. And I love that you said you just automatically default to, how does everybody feel about this?
I don't know another way to think. And this is an emotional topic for me. Here, we have to approach it from a place of understanding on a local level. As a cyclist, like, I'm involved in some of the meetings that are going to be happening between residents and drivers of cars and cyclists, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about, like, the rules of the road. And what it's come down to, Joe, is when people feel threatened, whether it's for their lives or their freedom or their security in some way, that's when we're going to get divisive and angry and mean and lash out. And so if we can approach it from a place of understanding that this isn't about right or wrong, this is about, every person's opinion is valid. So let's come together so that we can, from this foundation of safety and trust and everyone wanting a level of freedom here in space, have a voice.
I do come down to, even in that Supreme Court ruling, I often tell people I am far more conservative than any conservative on some issues, and I'm far more liberal than most liberals on some other issues. But I would love, as you just said, to have zero governance over my decisions as a business owner. I'm the one who does all the work. I take all of the risk. And so I should be able to run my business and serve who I want. So that's one side of Joe. The other side is, as a society, that's my individual right. As a society, we've decided we work better together when we're inclusive, and we can believe certain things. I think it was Truman. He was one of the last presidents to say, my religion, my faith has nothing to do with how I govern. Like, that's a total foreign concept today. You would think we would progress further into inclusion, but he said, I am the president over everybody, of every faith, of every belief system. So I don't bring that to the office. And I think of exactly what you're saying. We as fitness entrepreneurs have to realize that we are looking at everybody, and do we really want to exclude certain people? And so, again, coming back to our topic at hand, it's just, there's a time and a place to maybe extol some of those feelings you have and hash those out and have deep conversations. But in today's social media world, we have to know that other people are watching, and that becomes part of our brand identity.
Yes, and it's a massive responsibility. And if we don't take it seriously, then people will get hurt.
Yeah. So I just think as an entrepreneur, I go back to, you acquire more customers, and this is a metric. They study this. The number one common denominator is how many times you make somebody laugh. So when you're having these angry, divisive, partisan type discussions, you're
going to happen.
Get a reaction, but is it the one you want?
Right. Exactly.
So as fitness entrepreneurs, guys, I want to say, through all of this stuff, this is a big topic. We even got Corey to
you have made me cry.
Right. The bottom line is, we're in a business to help people transform their lives. We want them to feel better, to have better health, live longer, be happier, be more positive. And the great advantage we have is that all we have to do to attract those people to begin with is display that. Be positive, be inclusive, what are you known to be for instead of against? Be for things, be for better lives and inclusion and getting along and all of that stuff, progressing society instead of, just being out there building a wall about what you're against.
Yeah, well said, Joe. Thank you.
All right, guys, one last time, in just mentioning, we have Instagram accounts. That's kind of an underused thing in our company, I think. My personal Instagram account is Joe Klemczewski, and our company one is The Diet Doc Weight Loss.
Mm-hmm.
And we often post different things in different mediums. So some of the things you see on our YouTube page or channel is not going to appear there. So you guys should go out there and make sure you join that. And we will see you next time for another topic on the Diet Doc Lifestyle Mastery Podcast. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.